Good morning, everyone. Haven't even done my skincare. I literally just got changed and tied my hair, and that was it. And I have one of my little toys here. I forgot what I named him. I just want to show you guys my fit because otherwise it will go wasted. So I don't outfit repeat. This is the fit. I got pink super pants. And I always get compliments when I wear these. And I have my Glassons black off shoulder. And then I have this cardigan, which is from Dottie. I wanted to film this video to motivate me to actually wake up because just then I woke up via sleep paralysis. And first of all, a warning. So in my opinion, if you open yourself up to the spiritual world, that's how you kind of start to sense and see things. And so if you're someone who just wants to avoid it your whole life, you very much well could. So I'm just gonna say right here, right now, if you don't listen to this, then you probably won't become aware of the spiritual world. So I would kind of recommend that most of you probably should start watching. But if you do kind of know a little bit about it, or you've dipped your feet into it in the past, then you've probably already unlocked that door for yourself and you can keep watching. But I'm just warning you here now because it's almost like it manifests into your life the more that you look into it. And so I obviously don't want to bring harm to anyone in that sense because even mentally it can be quite terrifying. So just then I woke up from sleep paralysis. At first, I felt myself sinking into it, and so I started to try and move my muscle to get up, and instead I started dreaming about the fact that I did get up, and even took my retainer out of my bathroom, which is the first thing I do when I get up. And guess what? Opened my eyes slightly, and I was still in bed. All of that was a vision, a dream. And so I fell into a real sleep paralysis, and then I tried to do the same thing. So I kind of thought of myself as getting up. I have to really tense my muscle. I've literally gotten DOMS, muscle ache, from doing this, even though your body's not actually moving because you're paralyzed. And so I got up pretty successfully. I'm getting a bit faster at it now because I've had sleep paralysis for years now. And I thought of this idea something to motivate me to get up today would be to talk about this because I feel like I'm one of the only people I know who's had this kind of experience. So let's get started. I moved from my third ever house into my fourth house, and I moved from Kingsgrove to Strathfield. So if you don't know Sydney that well, Kingsgrove is you're heading down south, so you're going kind of in between Bankstown, Canterbury area and heading into Hurstville, and Strathfield is west inner west, so you're kind of in between Burwood, and then if you keep traveling forward, you're already literally in the west, Liverpool, Cabramatta, obviously if you drive a bit further. But yeah, so I moved houses. My Kingsgrove house was and is my favorite house so far. Just for some context, one of my schoolmates actually moved in there, and I found out from her Instagram story, which is just such a big coincidence, but she was nice enough to video call me and show me around. And number one, it looked a lot smaller than I remembered because I lived there from the ages of 3 to 6. So obviously to me, a 2-story house seemed like a mansion. And secondly, a lot of it was renovated, so it just didn't look the same. But anyway, I moved from that house, which was to me like a castle, the best kind of place that I could have ever lived in. I just had so many memories there in my cubby house, and watching movies and chilling and going into my dad's office while he worked and looking at photo albums of myself as a baby. I've always loved photos, as you can see. So I just have the best memories there. And when I moved into this Strathwood house, it was 1 story. And I remember so hard my 6-year-old self just trying to stay as positive about it as I could. I remember going into the house when it was fully furnished and jumping on the beds and being like, yeah, new house. But I distinctly remember the feeling of I don't like it here. It's not my big house. It's not modern. It feels very damp and dark here, and it's just not a nice feeling. I never really shook this feeling. And so when I was 7 or 8, we were inside because it was like a wet lunch. Like it was raining outside, so you go to sit inside and they usually put on a movie at school. And the movie was Nanny McPhee. It's this movie with Emma Thompson in it where she's kind of like a witch-looking nanny. And the scene that they have with her to enter is really scary. Like she's all dark and there's a storm going on. And from memory, I don't know, because I would never watch it, but I think she's actually meant to be a nice nanny, but they introduce her like that to make you think otherwise. And that scene, I still remember it in my head. Like it literally scared me so much because it was also raining outside. So there was like the pathetic fallacy, and it was just like the thunder they used, and she looked like a witch and you didn't know what she was going to look like until the shadow came off her face. And it just wasn't it for 8-year-old me. And so I remember going home that night and just being too terrified to sleep, because in this room that I was sleeping in, I slept in like a number of rooms in that house because they were all uncomfortable. But in this room in particular, on the side, there were these curtains, and they're just meant to open up kind of like a French window kind of thing. Like you open up the curtains and then it's like a rounded window and you can look outside to the front garden. Not that there was even much in the front garden, but anyway, obviously it was designed like this. By the way, I need to mention that my Stratford house is over 100 years old. I'm pretty sure at this point in time, it would be about 130 years old, which says a lot about what I'm going to tell you. And there were these curtains. Anyway, so they were like these thick, heavy curtains. We hardly ever opened them because obviously privacy. And so to me, it was like, I would never know what the hell is behind those curtains. Like, what if Nanny McPhee is literally behind these curtains? And pretty much the whole time I lived in this house, I was scared of those curtains. Like even after I obviously graduated from the thought that it could be Nanny McPhee. But I just have this really weird attachment to this house. Like I would write my English narratives about the house. I had this cat who was a stray cat and like kind of lived under the house. And I would like say hi to it and go to like the side of my house. And we called it Secrecy because she was a secret cat. And I still have dreams about this house and I still live considerably near it. So I spend a lot of time kind of like just trying to figure out what kind of house that was. And I think that was just bad energy in general. Like I was in my angsty tween stage and I had family issues, and I just don't think it was kind of like the nicest place to be. So maybe that also doesn't add to it. I also have a friend's mum who recently told me that now that I've moved out, she can say that she thinks that the house was laid out really random. I don't know what she means by that because I don't think she wanted to go into it, but she's someone who definitely knows about psychology and spirituality and all of that. So I'm just gonna believe that the layout was bad. It was a very randomly laid out house. I would borrow books from the library from like the senior section. We had to have permission. And I was like, ghosts aren't real, like spirits and whatever and haunted and horror things aren't real. So like, I'm just gonna read this stuff for fun. And they were all like fiction books about, I've forgotten the word now, but it's something where you're just about to die or you die for a few minutes and you're brought back to life. But in those few minutes, there's people who go to heaven or there's people who see their own body on the operating table in the hospital. And I thought that was so interesting. Actually, during this time, I was just reading a lot of horror, ghosts. I was 10. So I didn't know it, but that was kind of my voluntary opening into this whole world that you do not want to be in. It's a topic that carries a lot of weight, and so I don't want to rush it or anything. So I'm gonna take a break now. I increasingly felt spiritual presence in my house. The air becomes heavier and you start to feel like people are watching you all the time. And I hated going to practice the piano because of this, because you're facing the piano, you can't see what's behind you. And I also hated, well, pretty much everyone hated this really narrow, dark corridor. And my siblings felt it a lot when they were taking dumps there. I felt it too. I was always like constipated in that house because I think I was like so tense and so scared to actually like literally take a dump in that toilet. And my mum says that she could feel that when she did laundry next door to this very special bathroom, it was always late at night because she was obviously taking care of little kids, and so she didn't really have time to do it during the day. So at night she'd kind of wash the clothes from 11 to 1 a.m. and she said she could feel things. It was almost like they were trying to talk to her and touch her back, and she would kind of turn around and be like, what the heck? And there was obviously nothing there that she could see, but she could sense them. My dad also believes in ghosts and has a lot of friends who also believe in ghosts and spirits, etc. And so I'm pretty sure he felt something in the house, but in terms of like having an actual personal interaction, don't know if he actually did. My parents did not bring us up to believe in spirits. They weren't like, did you know there's something called spirits? It wasn't anything that they kind of told us. It was something that we definitely all sensed in this house. And that's kind of like the scary thing about it. I had insomnia for all 8 years that I lived in this house. As I mentioned before, I switched rooms a lot because I just hated all of them. I never slept alone in that house. I was literally 13 when we moved out of that house. And at that point, like I was still sleeping in rooms with like my dad, my brother, my mom, my sister. Like I've slept with every single member in that house because it was so scary for me. And my dad actually likes to sleep with lights on. So he always had this lamp on at night, and it kind of helped me. I just had really bad insomnia. I was always freaked out in that house. I always felt uncomfortable, and you can kind of feel the temperature dropping as well when a house is haunted. Well, all this telltale signs of that. And I became very aware of this when I went on a walk during lockdown, the first one, and it was a walk at night, and we decided to walk through my old street, and the whole street was fine until we got to the front of my house, my old house, and I immediately felt that sinking feeling again, and just the feeling that I was being watched and feeling really uncomfortable. And that really sealed the deal for me, that house was just special, and there was something about it that definitely had spirits. I'm gonna look shabbier and shabbier as I continue to film these. So now that I've moved into this house for the past 8 years, so I've lived here the exact amount of time that I lived in that old house. As soon as I moved here, I could sleep. I don't sense anything here. I sense more of a darkness, and in terms of knowing the difference between just being scared of the dark and being scared of actual spiritual presence. And something to also mention, if you're a Christian, is that with Jesus, we have the Holy Spirit in us, like the ultimate Holy Ghost. So we don't have to be afraid. And I know that, but as someone who's had actual spiritual experience when most people haven't, it's very hard for me to also overlook that sometimes. Like for the most part, it doesn't bother my life, but I can sense spiritual presence. It's handy for when I want to buy an apartment and house in the future, but I can immediately sense it in older houses or older places. One of my friend's houses has it, and she also believes in spirits and knows about this ghost that lives in her house. So I definitely sense it there. And it can be really weighing on your brain, especially when a lot of people these days don't believe in it. I think something that's important to note is that in developing countries, more people tend to believe in the spiritual world because that's their distraction from God. Whereas our distraction from God in developed country is the hustle, being a finance bro, having a good career and a house. And that's our distraction from focusing on God. So that's something that I've heard, which I think is really interesting. And I guess having a dad who grew up in Malaysia, where I'm pretty sure it's a place where people believe in spirits, I guess that's how I've come from a family that doesn't completely just dismiss the spiritual world, because even from a Christian perspective, it definitely exists. And there was one time when I asked my youth leaders in high school, why don't we talk about this? Like, why is everyone so hush-hush about it? And what they said is true, in that the more that you learn about it, the more scared you get, and there's no point in it. But it does exist. And the only thing we can really do to fight against it is believe in Jesus. And I'll segue into this story that I have, where my dad's friend from school, so this is in Malaysia, her uncle had a house that was very close to her school, and so instead of commuting every day, she decided to just move into that house by herself at the age of 16, because I'm assuming it was some kind of investment property, like a house that he didn't live in himself. And every single day and night, she would get tortured by these spirits. I don't know if there was one or more, and it gives me goosebumps to think about it, but they would chase her up the stairs and throw her against her bedroom wall and just full on torture her. And I was obviously terrified. I mean, I don't know how I would react in this situation at all. Like, I think that's one of the scariest things that could ever happen to you. And she went to a Catholic school and told one of the chaplaincy teachers, introduced God to her, and she started to become a Christian. She is Protestant now, I think, not Catholic anymore, but as soon as she believed in God, those spirits went away. And I think that's such a powerful story. Like, that's an example of how the Holy Spirit can cast off all other types of spirits. Another thing I haven't mentioned is that I don't believe in ghosts, because I do believe that you either go to heaven or hell after you die. I don't think there's any such thing as coming back to earth. And that's just based on my biblical understanding. So when I mention these spirits, I'm mentioning like existences that are like ghosts, but they're not dead people. And I don't know why they're in this world. Like, I have no idea why God decided to create them, but they're just here. And I have heard a lot of ghost stories that seem like they could be true. Like, oh, I saw this lady and it turns out it was the owner of my house 100 years ago. I can kind of see how those happen, but I guess maybe in terms of like my no ghost theory, maybe it's like a spirit who pretends to be the deceased person. Like, I'm not 100% sure if I believe in ghosts. Things that I think I've seen and heard. When I went to England with my school in 2015, I had a great time, but we did stay in a lot of hotels that were very old-fashioned, like clearly 200-year-old kind of inns. And there's a fashion in England, in all these hotels, to have a huge cupboard, like a Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe cupboard, like a really scary cupboard. And that's actually where you put your clothes, and I refused to put my clothes there. I refused to open them. I was so scared of these cupboards every single hotel we slept in, and it was just freaky. It freaked me out so much. And there were odd happenings in these hotels. Like, the people were creepy, as in the staff, and it just wasn't it. I just wasn't having a good time when it came to sleeping at night. There was one night that I really couldn't sleep. It was like the scariest hotel out of all of them. So it just happened that my room buddy in this circumstance was someone who could sleep through anything. Like, she could not care less about the spiritual world. You could tell her the scariest stories and she wouldn't be fazed. And so I couldn't rely on her because she was dead asleep within 5 minutes. The tap was dripping in the bathroom, so that was already adding to the creepiness of it all. And I just remember not being able to sleep. I was completely tense. My blanket was like just covering basically my face. I was so terrified. I was kind of drifting into this half sleep, and we were in this really random room where it was just designed weird because they obviously wanted to have more rooms than was possible. So they kind of had a landing and stairs and then another landing. And you know when you're like walking downstairs and you gotta kind of twist around, get to the other staircase. We were shoved into this corner room, and it was so random. A room that was made to accommodate more people and more customers. No one next door. We were inside, basically the inside of that building. I heard these two kind of electricians, and I remember as they were talking outside, that I was also kind of envisioning what exactly they were doing. And to me, it seemed like there was an electricity box right beside our room, because again, it was such a random position to be in for a room, and they were kind of just fixing it. I was like, kind of odd at 1 a.m, but I guess. They were talking about like, what time is it? Should this go here? You know, they were just fixing the electrical box. And I was like, okay. I woke up the next day and I remembered that I heard those electricians. And I was like, that was really weird that it was dead in the middle of the night, but whatever. Then I go outside my room and there's no electrical box. Like, whatever those men were doing out there were not looking at an electrical box, because there was no electrical box. And I look back and I think I was so fearful that I was hallucinating. However, I count this as a spirit story because although I'll never be sure, I did talk to a friend about it and she thinks that I did hear spirits and that they were people who were not actually there. My second encounter is actually right outside the window, and there was a stage maybe like 2017, 18 where a lot of houses in my street were building, and so we had a bunch of construction on at the same time. So my house is here and then there's another house and another house. Both of them were building. One of them next to me, right next to me, had scaffolding. Another one on the other side of them was built. I remember looking outside and I was just going through my own family issues on my own, and I was texting my friend and I literally messaged him a photo of this so I can put it in if I find it. I could hear shouting, like a couple arguing so loudly that I could hear them. Looked outside and I was looking through the scaffolding of the house next to me, so I was actually looking at the house 2 doors down. And the couple who used to live there actually did argue a lot, from what I've heard. I saw this room, and in this room I saw an air conditioner and a cupboard, but I didn't see the people. I only saw that I tried to like kind of get a good angle and like look a bit more above, but it just didn't work. Like, I think they were at a certain angle where I couldn't see them. I thought I was like freaking dreaming because it was like 3 a.m. I was like, is that a hallucination? But I have a photo. And so I went to bed, eventually went to sleep, woke up the next morning, and both houses were at scaffolding stage. There was no house in the house 2 doors down. It was not built yet, like I had thought the night before, or at 3 a.m. And that was also random. I also thought that was a hallucination, but I also told the same friend and she thinks that maybe there were spirits too. But again, I'll never be sure because how are you meant to prove that kind of thing? So that's my spiritual story. The next part, as you can see, this topic really weighs heavy. The next part of my story is to do with sleep paralysis because, as I told you guys, I woke up with it this morning. I've been having sleep paralysis ever since, I think, 2018. And it was really frequent 2 years ago at a period of time where I had heaps of exams and assignments. And people say it comes from lack of regular sleep schedule, so you're always sleeping at random times, which is kind of me, and that you can't really do anything about it. Some people also believe that it's spiritual. I'll insert a photo of a famous artwork here that depicts what it feels like. And if you haven't had it before, it feels like how I imagine hell. So a lot of people imagine hell to be the kind of fiery furnace with a bunch of demons walking around. And it's almost made into a joke these days because people think that it's some kind of fun house with everyone who's a rebel. But the way that I see hell and the way that I can also see it kind of depicted in the Bible is that maybe there's fire at first or at the entrance or something. Hell is a place without God. That's the clear definition of hell. And so I imagine hell to be like sleep paralysis in that you can't move, you feel like you can't breathe, you can never interact with anyone, because even if you scream out or if you see someone or know that someone's there next to you, you can't tell them that you're paralyzed. And you feel like something's weighing super heavy on you, and all that you're stuck with are your thoughts. So what sleep paralysis is that your brain has woken up before your body has, or your body has gone to sleep before your brain has. And you are genuinely paralyzed. It is such a scary feeling. And I think a lot more people have experienced sleep paralysis than seeing spirits. I learned to conquer it by actually lucid dreaming. One time I lucid dreamt myself out of my sleep paralysis, and also just catching it before you fall into deep sleep paralysis where you genuinely can't move. And when you wake up, it's like you're learning to breathe again. It's almost like when people have given you CPR after you've drowned and all the water comes out and you're like, oh, and you can feel yourself being able to breathe again. I don't know why some people get it and others don't. Some people genuinely think that it symbolizes spiritual warfare, like if you're kind of at odds with God, like maybe you struggle with a sin. But I don't know exactly if that's what it is. It seems viable, but I don't know if that's the only thing it is. I don't know why it exists, and I don't know what it is, but it just sucks that sometimes you wake up like that and sometimes you fall asleep like that. And it's true the tip people say about not sleeping on your back, because if you sleep on your back, it happens a lot more frequently. So I tend not to unless I'm kind of moving around when I'm trying to wake up over a few hours. And so sometimes I'll lie on my back and kind of like put my arm up like that, and that position immediately launches me into sleep paralysis. I don't know why. I feel like a heavy weight talking about it, which is why I feel like I'm kind of out of breath now. It's just such a mental toll, and it is something that you just need to get comfortable talking about sometimes, because the more you do talk about it, the scarier it is, until you get past that stage like I have, where I've talked about it with so many people that I feel like I'm comfortable enough to share. And it's still scary because it's, as I said, it's almost like you manifest it into your life. I got interrupted, but I realized I forgot to use cinematic mode just then, so it looks even shabbier than I thought. I am basically just trying to document what I know and what I've seen. I just think that it's something that definitely should be talked about, and not necessarily not be scared of, but just something where it's okay to be informed about it, and it's okay to have these experiences without an explanation why. And so I just wanted to document this and talk about it, because I think some people might find it interesting as well. And I'll see what kind of experiences I have in the future, I guess. Not that I want any, but I'm sure they will happen, because as I said, I can consistently sense where is haunted. Say hi.
Hi. Ooh,
Bill just arrived. So I was filming a video about my experience with like haunted places.
Mm-hmm.
And so Bill is someone who doesn't actually believe in it, but when we were at the Blue Mountains the other day during dead hour, which is 3 a.m, where you could feel it the most, we were driving through this really dark, all these farms. Do you remember those roads? And the road was kind of blocked off, but even Bill could feel it then.
Oh, that's not ghosts, that's just being scared.
But I think you can feel a type of heaviness, which is my point.
Because it's an unfamiliar place, so you feel a bit scared of the unknown. So you fear the unknown.
No.
The greatest thing we fear is fear itself.
And on that note, bye.